Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger Clark, and welcome to Tech Talk this afternoon on if logic. We're going to spend about a half hour talking about how to use if functions, the if function in Excel, and we're going to expand on that and talk about nested if functions, and we're going to include and or inside of that as well. If you do have any questions within the GoToWebinar panel, there is a questions option there. Please feel free to type your questions out, and the goal here is to do about 15-20 minutes on if logic and then to take a look at these questions and answer them for you. So as they pop up, please feel free to check out the questions panel, type out your questions, and I'll do my best to answer all of them to your satisfaction. So let's talk about the if function in Excel and how we use it. So give me 1 second to bring up my Excel spreadsheet here. The idea behind an if statement, an if function, well, that's weird. That's you should be seeing. Oh, wait, why is this shows my screen is paused? And there we go. Okay, very bizarre. So the idea behind dealing with the if function is we're, in a simple idea, I look at this simple spreadsheet here. I have 3 salesmen, and I have their sales, their quota, and the months employed, and I have a commission, and I have a couple commission rates here. This is not something where these 3 I would necessarily need to use an if function. If sales is greater than a quota, then I will give them a commission, right? We're talking 3 users, or there are 3 salespeople, 3 lines, not a big deal. However, we all know that one of the benefits of using Excel is being able to take the autofill handle and put a formula in one cell and drag it all the way down and have it flesh out all the other cells. Well, if I was dealing with 40, 50, 200, 300, 3,000 different salespeople and I had to keep track of commissions of all of them, I would definitely not want to type this formula over and over and over again, or have to go line by line and calculate out these commissions. So instead, I'm going to create a formula for the first one that handles the logic portion for me, and then when I fill it down, it basically then takes care of the rest of the problem. So how does an if function work? It's a very simple idea, right? So just like anything else, so in our first simple scenario here, we're simply going to say is if Mary's sales exceed her quota, she gets a commission of 2%. Okay, there's my 2% value there. All right, so the every formula that has a calculation in it always starts with equals, right? So we always start with equals, and then we have a function called if, and you can tell that you know you have it right if it pops up in the list there. That is one of them. And every function, of course, has an argument with parentheses, right? The different parts of the arguments are encapsulated inside parentheses. Now, I will tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things about Excel that always excited me and actually helped me learn how to use this program. I did not sit down and read the book cover to cover on every single function that exists within Excel. That's an impractical concept. I did, however, learn early on that every function, if you notice that when I start typing it, this tooltip pops up, and it doesn't matter if you type it here or here on the formula bar. In both cases, the tooltip pops up. Notice that the name of the function is actually hyperlinked. If you click on that, it actually opens up a help file for every single if function, or every single function, excuse me, inside of Excel. Complete with videos, everything you want, and everything you want to know about working with your functions. So every function has a help file. This is how I learned Excel. I got in a habit of looking at spreadsheets that other people gave me before I started making changes to update them and edit them for my work. I would look at the formulas and go, why did they use that function? Click on the links, learn how to use these functions, and that's really how I expanded my knowledge for dealing with if, or in this case, the if statement, but in general with Excel. So we're building an if function, and the straightforward idea here equals if we have a logic test, a value if the test is true, and a value if the test is false. So it's a simple idea, right? My car is low on gas. Do I need to get gas here, or can I wait till I get to the next station, right? It's a logic test, yes or no. There's really no other answer if it yes or no. So in this simple concept, if the sales is greater than the quota, comma, we're going to take the sales rate and we're going to give them a 2% commission based on that value there. Now, it says C2 times H2 here, right? Now remember, and one of my, if you were a fan of mine, you've been to all my webinars so far, all my tech talks, and I talked about in the very first one, I talked about absolute versus relative referencing. And what that means in this case is when I hit the function key F4, I get dollar signs around the H, or in front of the H, in front of the 2. Remember, locking this value in. I'm going to use the fill handle to fill down this formula when I'm done across cells 3 and 4, rows 3 and 4. And I want the first part of that formula to change from C2 and from row 2 to row 3 to row 4. However, my commission is in a specific cell. It's in H2. By making this an absolute reference, when I fill the formula, then that value, that portion of the formula is going to stay the same. So we have a logical test. If it's true, we take their sales, we multiply it by 2%, comma, and then the value if it's false. If they didn't exceed their quota, they don't get a commission, they get bupkis. So I'm going to actually put a 0 there because I don't want them to get anything. Because I open the parentheses, I close the parentheses, and when I hit this button here, as if by magic, we'll see that Mary Thompson did not get a commission. Okay, now, in this example, Mary did not get a commission, but man, she's only $1 away, for goodness sakes. Do I really want to be that stingy of a boss and say, you know what, if you don't exceed it, you don't get it? Or in this case, can we cut her a little bit of slack by saying, instead of just greater than, we can say greater than or equal to? Well, we know, you know, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to allow her to do greater than or equal to, but my question is, how do I type that, right? I don't have this symbol here that we typically see, right, the greater than or equal to. I don't have that symbol. So in lieu of that, if you're working in spreadsheets and you want to represent greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, this is how you express it. You draw the the greater than or less than sign followed by the equal symbol. So I simply would put, whoops, I put the equal symbol there. If it's greater than or equal to D2, then she gets the commission, otherwise she doesn't. And we will see here that at this point, she does actually get a commission of 2%. And then if I use my little handle here and pull it down, I get my other entries there. And by the way, another cool Roger tip for you, if you have all of your information lined up and you just need to go all the way down to row 300, don't try to drag that little handle all the way down to row 300. You put your cursor over the little hinge or the autofill handle. It always looks like a hinge to me. That's why I call it that. If I double click, it will fill all the way down the list for you, so you don't have to drag it all the way down and deal with the wonderful issues we deal with when we're dealing with dragging the handle. Okay, so here again, I typed the formula in the first one. We have a logic test, greater than or equal to C is greater than or equal to D. If they succeed, we get a commission of 2%, and otherwise they don't receive anything, and that is a basic if function. So at this point, let's take a look at a couple of additional scenarios here and see how this pans out. I did see a question pop up. I'll address that a little bit later. And so let's take a look at a couple scenarios. So the first scenario, that's the one we've been dealing with now, right? The sales exceeds the quota. And that's exactly what we did on this first one here, right? If C2 is greater than or equal to D is greater than D2, then we give them a 2%. So what about this idea? This says if the sales is within $3,000 of the quota, we'll give them 1%. So now I have to deal with two different issues. In addition to the 2%, I have a second commission rate that comes into play if we're trying to be more liberal with our commissions. We want to reward someone who is still working hard for us. They just didn't quite get their quota. We still want to give them a little bit of something, so we're going to basically do that. So in that case, we're now going to talk about the idea of a nested if. Okay, we're going to nest one if statement inside the other. So what that means is, now once we get done with the first true statement, instead of a false statement, I now add another if statement. So you're simply saying, if this is true, do this. If that doesn't work, try the next if statement. So I can actually cascade or nest if statements inside of each other. Now, there's an important safety tip that goes along with this. We have two scenarios, right? We have two scenarios here, and I'm going to back up here. We have two scenarios, and we're saying if it's within 3,000, we do this. But if I still have this first issue in play. If the sales exceeds the quota, we give them 2%. If you get within 3,000, you get 1%. So both of these options are in play. Now, at this point, I'm going to nest it together, but it's important to note in which order we do this. Okay? So, for example, if I were to put in the second condition, sales within 3,000 quota, 1%. So what that would look like, and I'll build it here real quick. So I would say equals if this is I'm sorry, not the months, their sales is within this, is greater than this minus 3,000, right? So in other words, we're allowing up, in this case, Mary's second quota would be 45,000. Follow me? Okay. Then I would take this value and I would multiply it by this commission rate of 1%, F4, right? And then I would say, okay, however, if you do this is greater than this as the rule, comma, I could take this and you can multiply it by this value, right? Whoop, forgot the magic word there of if. Okay, so I have the first statement you can try. This is the first true statement. The false statement says, try again. If this is better than this, we do it times H2, and if that doesn't work, if they still can't do it, we still would give them 0. And note that I have to close two parentheses here, right? I'm closing this first if statement, or there's the inner one, and then finally I close the outer one. Now, in this example, I'm going to get, oops, what did I do wrong? I did something wrong. Is this isn't this, do that times this. Oh, ha, ha, ha. This is supposed to be C2 times H2 F4. Okay. So, logic test number 1 is right here. The value if it's true, the value if it's false is that whole thing, right? But in this example, watch what happens when I enter the formula. She actually got the lower rate commission, even though her sales are, and even if I do the greater than or equal to in that, she still gets the lower commission. And the question is why? Okay, the easy answer is this. Think of an if statement like a teenager that you ask them to do something for you. It's going to do just the minimum amount to get the job done. An if statement reads from left to right, and as soon as it hits a true value, it stops. So in this case, Mary now meets both of these criteria, but since it meets the first one, it's done. It's going to put in the first true statement. It's important when you work with an if statement. Now look down here, you'll see that I actually have it listed in the right way, right? We put the most stringent condition or the most difficult objective first. If it doesn't meet that one, then we cascade down or nest down to the less challenging issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can nest, the last I saw it written down, you could have up to 10, but I think with the newer versions of Excel, you can actually nest it even more than that. There are other tools that you might want to consider if you're doing that much nesting, but for the purposes of our discussion, this is how the nesting works. Okay, so what I should have done in this case, so this formula is flat out wrong. So in this case, going back up to this one, if we're going to do the right way, I'm just copy this real quick since that's the right version of the formula. I'm simply going to replace this formula now with, again, if C2 is greater than D2, we give them the 2% value, H2. If C2 is within 3,000 of the quota, we'll give them the 1%. So again, oops, what did I do? I forgot to close the extra parentheses. And when I fill it down, we see that everybody is getting something, even though this one who didn't normally hit the condition. So that's how we deal with the idea of a nesting an if statement together. Now, the next scenario I want to address is what if we have multiple criteria? So in this example, we have our employees, we have the sales greater than the quota, but let's say instead of doing a two-tiered structure, we're going to reward people who have been here long enough. Actually, more strictly first, we'll say, in addition to being here, in addition to meeting your quota, we only pay commissions to salesmen who have been here for over 2 years. So right now, I'm going to say there's 2 different scenarios in place. So in that case, we have what's called an and scenario. So we basically have 2 criteria. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and I'll delete these out. We have 2 criteria now. So it's equals if, and then we have 2 criteria. Now, unlike a nested criteria still says meet one of the following conditions, right? In a cascading order. If this one doesn't work, try this one, etc. But now I actually have 2 actual conditions. Okay? So in this environment, I'm going to say, or in this scenario, I'm going to put another function inside of the if, and that function is and. And please note, by the way, I'm not worried about case sensitivity as I type these. You can type them in uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. So because it's another function, we have another argument in parentheses. So now look at the syntax here. It simply asks us to specify, separated by commas, each logical statement. So all of this being the true statement, right? So in this case, we're saying, if this is greater than the quota, comma, the second logical statement is the months employed must be greater than 24, and I close parentheses. So the next question I have, does it matter in this case what order I put these logical tests in? In this example, it does not, because the word and here is specifying any and all of these statements, these logical tests, must be true. This one and this one and this one. All right. So then now we're back to the value if it's true. If both are true, we take their sales, we multiply it by their commission bonus, F4, absolute reference, comma, and once again, if they don't meet both of these requirements, they do not get anything, and we make sure we close both. Actually, we've already closed the main if statement. The and statement is closed, and the if statement is closed. And when I hit enter, we'll see that even though, and I went back to equals, by the way, so even though she's been here for over 2 years, I remove, it's just, I'm back to greater than only. So even though she's been here for over 2 years, she did not beat her quota, therefore she doesn't get anything. And when I scroll it down, we'll see, I don't think anybody gets anything at this point. No, because I've said in this case, 2 conditions have to be met, right? This person exceeded their quota, this person didn't exceed their quota, but neither of them have been here for 2 years. Okay, so now I'm getting really stingy, and my Christmas presents from my staff are in danger of being a bunch of coal in a stocking. So I decided to loosen up a little bit. I'm going to say, instead of the and statement, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to reward the people who've been here the longest. So I'm going to say if either condition is true. If you've been here for over 24 months, it doesn't matter. You will still get a bonus. And if you've been here if you exceed your quota, you know both statements are true. So in this example, I can change that and to an or. At that point, now we're saying I don't care which one is true as long as one of them is true. Okay, so you could actually, again, have a series of them together. Now, again, in this case, well, how does this differ from the nested if? Well, in the nested if, we had different results depending on what value we got. In this case, both logic tests apply, but there's still only one true statement, right? The value if it's true is that. My logical test is all of this, right? My logical test is all of this. My value if it's true doesn't change. My value if it's false doesn't change. But you'll see that at this point, everybody gets a little bit of something, something. Okay? So we have the if and the and we have and the or. All right? All right, so to recap this idea, so again, at this point, I want to remind you that if you have any questions about what we're talking about at this point, please use the questions tab on I'll go to webinar there, and I'll be sure to answer any questions for you. I'll do one little one here. Someone asks, where would you go to follow any of my any TED Talks or YouTubes? Unfortunately, right now I don't have anything. The good news is that this webinar and other webinars that I've done here for CPS HR are available on the internet site. You'll be emailed links to the videos, so you can go back and replay these and learn more about it from there. If you have specific questions, email them to CPS HR. They will forward them to me, and I'll do my best to answer them for you guys. To recap this idea, to sort of make sure we get a good feeling for it, again, the if statement is simple, right? The key components of this conversation are saying, hey, more importantly, we need to have a logic test, a true or false, yes or no statement. So someone asks, how am I dragging the formulas down to work for the other cells? Okay, so again, so this is that cool feature that's built into Excel called the Autofill Handle, okay? In the lower right-hand corner of an active cell, so this has the formula in it, you'll see this little green square, and if I put my cursor over it, it turns into a black plus. That little thing, I call it the hinge. It's technically called the Autofill Handle. And this is the main reason why I had to make this part of the formula here an absolute reference. Because in order to drag a formula down, so let's consider, for example, if I don't make this absolute, and I go back to there, now when I fill this down, I get an error here, but I should get an error, I should get a commission here. Notice these other guys aren't getting any commissions, but they meet one of the criteria. How come they're not getting commissions? Because the absolute value here, that absolute reference didn't change, or that changed. This changed from H2 to H3 and from H3 to H4, which are these guys here. There's nothing in there, so we multiplied it by 0 and we got errors. So I go back to here, I delete those values. I go back to here, we make this absolute, the function key F4. And then when I click on that little hinge and click and drag down, I copy the formula down to the subsequent cells. Another alternative again, if you have all of them together, you can double click on that little thing and it goes all the way down to the end of, excuse me, the end of your table. All right, so could I have still done the 1% version of this as well? Yes, and in that case, again, I could do the same idea. I'll copy all of this here. I will go to the false statement. And now we would say if C2 is greater than or equal to D2, in this case, I would say minus 3,000, right? B2 still has to be better than 24, and let's, you know what, let's just be a little more friendly. We'll go ahead and do the equal sign. So if you're right at the quota, like Mary here, she's not going to lose out on her commission, right? So in this case, we're greater than or equal to in both cases. The OR is allowing me to test either or. Now this statement then would be H3. Whoops, I'm sorry, I3. I2, it's that new math there. I2, okay. And then notice at the end we have a 0. At the end of the day, there is only one false statement in any if statement. There's only one false with the function. The first one, at the end of the day, if you notice, if I click all the way back to here, right, when I say false, all of that is the false, okay? Because it didn't meet this criteria of true. We try all of this. Since this one also has a false statement, we finally get the false statement for the whole function, and we get 0. And again, here's this issue where I need to close both parentheses. Okay? I will see now, Mary got hers. And by the way, I did not fill that down just now. Excel actually said, oh, you did the first one of a series. It looks like you probably want these other two to adjust as well. And it sure enough did that automatically for me. So Excel is actually helping us out here. Because I filled it down once, if I edit the first one, it's assuming that I want the subsequent ones to change as well. Okay, so thus endeth my my little tirade here on if logic in Excel. I hope you enjoyed what we did this afternoon, and hopefully you got something out of this. Again, this video will be uploaded to the CPS HR intranet site, so you guys can go in and play this back, download it, share with a friend, and see how to do all this cool stuff that we do here. And if you like this, I'll be doing one a month, and I've got something coming up for you guys next month as well. So at this point, I'm going to wrap this up. You guys have been a great audience, and go about your day. Don't work too hard, and we'll talk to you guys soon.